At exactly 04:00 a.m., October 11, 2025, Russia unleashed a coordinated aerial assault designed to break a city. More than 80 ballistic and cruise missiles, including the supposedly unstoppable Kinzhal hypersonic weapon, streaked towards Kyiv, Ukraine. They were preceded by over 150 Shahed 136 drones, a slow-moving wave of explosives meant to overwhelm and exhaust Ukrainian defenses. Facing them was not a collection of standalone weapons, but a single integrated network. Outnumbered, outgunned, 4 hours later. The skies over Kyiv were clear. 95% of the incoming threats were destroyed, their fragments littering empty fields. Meanwhile, Russian command posts and launch sites deep behind the lines were burning. A multi-billion-dollar miscalculation. The target was not a single building, but the strategic center of gravity of an entire nation, Kyiv, a city of 3 million people, the seat of government, the logistical and symbolic heart of Ukrainian resistance. Its survival was non-negotiable. To lose control of its airspace, even for a few hours, would be a catastrophic failure, shattering civilian morale and disrupting military command. As analysts at the renowned Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, have noted, the defense of such a target depends not on one superior weapon, but on the intelligent networking of every sensor, every launcher, and every piece of intelligence. A system of systems. Russian preparation was based on a fatal assumption, that overwhelming mass would guarantee success. Their intelligence, weeks out of date, pointed to depleted Ukrainian missile stocks and predictable defensive patterns. They planned a textbook saturation attack, following a doctrine that had remained largely unchanged. But Ukraine was not playing by the book. For days, its intelligence services, fused with NATO data streams, watched the buildup. They saw the troop movements. They monitored the communications. They understood the Shahed drones were not the primary threat. They were the bait, a cheap, disposable tool to expose and drain Ukraine's most valuable defensive assets before the real strike arrived. The stakes were absolute. The defense of Kyiv was a defense of national sovereignty itself. Failure would not just mean the loss of infrastructure, it would signal to the world that Ukraine's defenses were broken, potentially halting the flow of critical international aid. It was a test of technology, of doctrine, and of will. A battle where the cost of a single mistake would be measured in thousands of lives. This is the reality of 21st century warfare. It is not simply force against force. It is intelligence versus assumption, adaptation versus rigidity. What you are about to see would provide a brutal lesson in the difference between the two. The math of the engagement seemed impossible. The outcome was anything but. At 03:00 a.m., 1 hour before the main assault, the first wave appeared on Ukrainian radar screens. 150 Shahed drones crawling across the border. The trap was set. The battle for Kyiv's sky had begun. At 03:05 a.m., the first wave crossed the border. Not with the roar of jets, but the low hum of repurposed scooter engines. 150 Shahed 136 drones. Slow, loud, technologically simple. Their flight path was direct, broadcast with minimal attempts at concealment. On Russian command screens, it looked like the opening move of a conventional saturation attack. The Ukrainian air defense network lit up, but the response was disciplined, layered, and unexpected. It was not the multi-million-dollar Patriot missiles that engaged first. Instead, it was the Gepard self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, firing bursts of 35mm cannon shells, mobile fire teams with heavy machine guns, short-range missile systems. The strategy was one of economic attrition. Ukraine was using ammunition worth thousands to destroy drones worth tens of thousands. Russia, meanwhile, believed their plan was working perfectly. They saw their cheap drones drawing fire from Ukraine's most advanced systems. Convinced they were emptying the magazines of the Patriots and Iris teams. The Russian doctrine demanded a response to every threat, and their operators complied. They fired. They reacquired targets. They reported successful intercepts. Every Shahed that fell from the sky was seen as a victory, a confirmation that their brute force tactic was succeeding. It was a flawless execution of a fundamentally flawed plan. At 3:45 a.m., the last of the Shahed drones was shot down or reached its target. Russian command tallied the results. Ukrainian air defense had activated, expended significant munitions, and revealed its approximate locations. The sky was now clear for the main event. Mission accomplished. Or so they believed. Stop. Consider what just happened in those 45 minutes. The Russian command followed its doctrine perfectly. Every visible threat was engaged. The result? Exactly what Ukrainian intelligence had planned for. In modern warfare, the perfect execution of an outdated strategy is simply a more efficient path to defeat. The real threat was not on their radar screens, not yet. At 0:40 a.m., the board was reset. The decoys had done their job. The trap had been baited. Now, the hammer would fall. At exactly 04:05 a.m., the main assault began. From air bases hundreds of kilometers away, 295 bombers released their payloads. From the Black Sea, warships launched Caliber cruise missiles. And from mobile ground launchers, Iskander ballistic missiles roared to life. This was the true strike package. Calibers, flying at Mach 0.8, hugged the terrain at an altitude of just 20 meters, using the curvature of the Earth to mask their approach from ground-based radar. Iskanders launched into a quasi-ballistic trajectory, reaching speeds of Mach 7 and releasing decoys to confuse interceptors. And then, the Kinjal. Launched from a MiG-31K, the hypersonic missile accelerated to over Mach 10, its plasma trail a searing indictment of conventional air defense. But Kyiv was protected by more than just launchers. It was a shield, an integrated, multi-layered intelligence system. As the threats converged, the network came alive. The long-range radar of the Patriot PAC-3 system acquired the high-altitude ballistic targets first, the Iskanders and the Kinjal. Simultaneously, the 360-degree radars of the Iris-T and NASAM systems picked up the low-flying calibers. There was no single point of failure. Targets were assigned automatically based on priority, speed, and trajectory. It was seamless, a digital orchestra of defense. The Russian plan to overwhelm one system was met by a network that shared the load. The tension peaked at 04:18 a.m. A Kinjal missile was detected on its terminal approach. By the time it entered the Patriots' effective engagement envelope, the defenders had less than 40 seconds to lock, launch, and intercept a target moving at over 3 kilometers per second. The mathematics were unforgiving. 2 PAC-3 interceptors launched, their own motors burning at Mach 5, climbing on a collision course calculated by supercomputers. The sky lit up from an explosion at 60,000 feet. The unstoppable weapon was stopped. This engagement highlighted a critical vulnerability, as documented by open-source intelligence analysts at Oryx, who verify losses through visual evidence. A missile battery under sustained attack is limited by its reload time. After firing a full salvo, even the most advanced system is temporarily defenseless. Ukraine's entire strategy was built around exploiting that window. At 04:30 a.m., the first wave of Russian missiles had been broken, but the network had been tested, its resources taxed. The second Russian wave was already inbound, and a third, far more dangerous threat was now approaching completely undetected. At 04:35 a.m., as Russian missiles were still being intercepted over Kyiv, the Ukrainian counterattack was launched. This was not a missile strike. It was something new. 368 long-range drones and FPVs lifted off from dozens of concealed locations. They flew low and slow. Their radar cross-sections were minuscule. Their heat signatures were negligible. They were ghosts, slipping under the coverage of Russia's formidable S-400 air defense systems, which were oriented to detect high-altitude threats, not a swarm of plastic and carbon fiber skimming the treetops. Ukrainian intelligence had spent weeks mapping the electronic battlefield. They knew the locations of the Russian command posts, the electronic warfare hubs, the communications nodes, and, most importantly, the vulnerable missile resupply vehicles. The approach was silent. The drones navigated using pre-programmed GPS waypoints, switching to inertial navigation in the final phases to immunize themselves from jamming. This was the culmination of everything. Weeks of intelligence gathering, months of technological adaptation, all focused on this single, decisive moment. The Russian defense was looking up at the sky, focused on Kyiv, while the real danger was coming from below, from behind. It was a masterful display of misdirection. Their doctrine was built to fight a symmetric war, but this was not that war. The climax arrived between 05 a.m. and 05:15 a.m. The FPV drones, piloted in real time by operators miles away, reached their targets. The first-person view cameras transmitted the final seconds of their flight. A Krasuka 4 mobile jamming system, a $20 million piece of equipment designed to blind NATO aircraft, was hit by a drone worth $800. A command vehicle coordinating Iskander launches vaporized. A transport truck loaded with 2 fresh Kaliber missiles for a follow-up strike detonated in a massive secondary explosion, the fireball visible for miles. Impact. One after another, the nerve endings of the Russian assault were severed. On screens in the Russian command bunkers, data feeds flickered and died. Communications became static. The coordinated attack fell apart. The aftermath was immediate and undeniable. The numbers don't tell the full story, but they reveal the scale. Dozens of high-value targets destroyed by munitions, costing a fraction of their worth. This was not just defense. This was intelligence defeating force. Precision defeating mass. The future defeating the past. The strike was complete. The immediate action lasted less than 30 minutes. But the consequences would reshape the next phase of the war. At 05:30 a.m., the damage assessment began in earnest. By 7:30 a.m., just 2 hours after the counterstrike concluded, the first high-resolution satellite images became available. The analysis was stark. The data confirmed what thermal imaging had suggested: a catastrophic failure for the Russian assault force. Visual verification from open-source analysts at the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, who synthesize battlefield data, would later confirm the paralysis of at least 3 Russian brigades due to the loss of command infrastructure. The attack on Kyiv had been repelled, but the Ukrainian Counterpunch had surgically dismantled the enemy's ability to sustain the operation. On the ground, secondary explosions continued for hours as ammunition stores cooked off. The fires from ignited fuel tankers burned with such intensity they were visible from orbit. A multi-billion-dollar offensive planned for weeks and involving Russia's most advanced strategic assets had been neutralized in less than 90 minutes. The immediate military effect was absolute. The Russian assault was over. The airspace was secure. The tactical victory, however, was not without price. The human cost of the Russian rear area strikes was significant. Initial reports confirmed 47 killed in action, more than 80 wounded, with 19 listed as critical. The casualties were concentrated among logistics personnel, command staff, and missile crews, specialists who are difficult to replace. These were not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were vehicle commanders, radar technicians, and communications officers. The operational brain of the assault had been decapitated. The psychological shockwave radiated outwards from the impact zones. For the survivors, the attack represented an impossible breach of security. Rear areas they had considered safe were suddenly the front line. Post-traumatic stress assessments would become standard procedure for hundreds of personnel. Unit cohesion in the affected brigades degraded immediately. The strategic calculus of war is often brutal. A finite number of casualties weighed against a strategic objective achieved. That equation offers no simple comfort. But the operational result was undeniable. Russia's capacity for a repeat, large-scale attack in this sector was crippled for months. Beyond the immediate human toll, the tactical cascade began. The ripple effects were felt within hours. Russian command, fearing follow-up strikes, ordered an immediate pullback of all high-value assets. S-400 batteries, command posts, and ammunition depots were relocated 50 kilometers further from the front lines. This decision conceded a massive safe zone to Ukrainian forces, granting them greater freedom of movement. The initiative had completely shifted. This redeployment had a cascading effect on logistics. Supply routes, already strained, became longer and more predictable. Command and control, once centralized, became fragmented. Communications that were previously instantaneous now suffered from delays and required vulnerable relay stations. The operational tempo of the entire Russian front in the region degraded. A 5-minute response time for air support became a 30-minute response time. Coordinated attacks became isolated skirmishes. For the next week, the Russian front was not fighting to advance. It was struggling simply to hold its ground. Weeks later, the full strategic implications became clear. The Russian military's doctrine of massed missile strikes, a cornerstone of its power projection, had been publicly defeated. The myth of hypersonic invincibility was shattered. For the Kremlin, the political fallout was severe. Within 72 hours of the attack, the commander of Russia's aerospace forces was officially reassigned. A widespread investigation into intelligence failures and doctrinal shortcomings was launched, a clear sign of internal turmoil. Public confidence, though difficult to measure, was visibly shaken by the undeniable evidence of the successful Ukrainian counterstrike. Internationally, the reaction was swift. NATO partners accelerated deliveries of air defense munitions to Ukraine. Their confidence in the systems and the operators validated. Other nations, previously reliant on Russian military hardware, began quietly exploring alternatives. The attack on Kyiv didn't just save a city, it reshaped the global arms market and altered the strategic calculus of nations thousands of miles away. It proved that a smaller, more agile, and technologically adept force could defeat a superpower's brute force. The operation validated 3 core principles of modern warfare. First, intelligence over firepower. Ukraine did not try to match Russia missile for missile. Instead, it used superior intelligence to identify the critical vulnerabilities of the entire system. Second, precision over mass. A few dozen low-cost drones achieved what hundreds of expensive interceptors could not. They didn't just stop the attack, they dismantled it. The cost-benefit analysis is staggering. An estimated $3 million in Ukrainian drones neutralized an offensive asset package worth over $2 billion. And third, adaptation over doctrine. While Russia executed a predictable, rigid plan, Ukraine demonstrated rapid, creative adaptation. Russia's failure was systemic, not individual. Their doctrine assumed air superiority. It assumed their rear areas were secure. It assumed their most advanced weapons were unstoppable. Reality proved every assumption wrong. Their command structure was too rigid to react to a threat it had never anticipated. The mismatch between their 20th century doctrine and Ukraine's 21st century tactics was catastrophic. Military academies will study these events for decades, not just for the weapons used, but for the thinking behind them, how intelligence defeated force, how planning defeated firepower. The lesson is clear. In the 21st century, it is not about who has the biggest army, it is about who has the smartest strategy. The trajectory is clear. The cost of effective, long-range, precision attack is plummeting. The cost of defending against it is skyrocketing. This asymmetric reality will define the next 50 years of conflict. Nations will now invest less in heavy armor and more in electronic warfare, unmanned systems, and real-time intelligence networks. The playbook that Ukraine wrote over Kyiv is being copied, studied, and improved upon by nations around the globe. The age of the drone swarm, of the intelligent network, and of the economically impossible to defend against attack has arrived. This is the new battlefield. The assault on Kyiv failed. The Russian doctrine was broken. The war continues, but its rules have been fundamentally rewritten. It is a new era, defined not by mass, but by precision, not by force, but by intelligence. This operation reveals the new reality of warfare, not firepower, but intelligence, not mass, but precision. From the multi-week intelligence preparation to the 90-minute execution, this is how modern conflicts are decided. And understanding this changes everything. For in-depth analysis of operations like this, technical breakdowns of tactics and technology, strategic implications explained clearly, real warfare, not propaganda, subscribe for the next deep dive. Because in modern conflict, understanding the battlefield is the battlefield. Your analysis, the deception strategy, the cost-benefit calculation. What should military doctrine look like if this becomes the standard? Share your perspective below.